If you're receiving this transmission, you are the Resistance. Andrew Demeter reporting on behalf of Infowars.com. 1992, Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. The United Nations, or UN, holds a conference concerning 21st century implementations for global sustainable development. The product of this summit is a 300-page document entitled Agenda 21, an action plan outlining smart growth simplified into 4 E's: economy, equity, environment, and education. Superficially, Agenda 21's premise appeals to virtually any environmentalist, but the devil, or the colluding globalists pulling the strings, is shrouded in between the lines of this lifeless literature. Justified as the preservation of Earth's finite resources, this plot of oligarchic separation further divides the 99% from the 1%. The elitists' monopoly over the world's wealth is augmented, while your standard of living is fragmented. Let's talk specifics. The paper's first of 4 sections explores the global scope of social and economic societal dimensions, combating poverty, changing consumption patterns, and enhancing the collective quality of life. But to effectively fulfill these ambitions, a communistic outlook of systematic wealth redistribution must be actualized, ignoring, that is, the outsourcing of jobs, exacerbating the unemployment rate, and the Federal Reserve bailing out foreign banking institutions. Relatedly to amplifying the voices of those suppressed by adversity, Agenda 21's strengthening the role of major groups amplifies the societal role of minorities, specifically women, non-government organizations, and the youth. While Agenda 21 embraces the leveling of playing field for self-sufficient farmers too, the authors must be subconsciously referring to their morally corrupted cronies over at Monsanto. The UN's genuine goal is not that of equity. It is of abolishing private property, and I quote, "Land cannot be treated as an ordinary asset controlled by individuals and subject to the pressures and inefficiencies of the market," end quote. Ironically, the Constitution contests this subtle thievery of rights. Quote, "Private property shall not be taken for public use without due process of law," end quote. In short, the United Nations is justifying the unconstitutional deprivation of citizenry property rights by preserving rural space for, and we all know, the employment of Monsanto's poisonous GMO. Verbatim from Professor Jeffrey Sachs' 1991 policy paper prepared for the UN concerning Agenda 21, quote, "In order to stabilize the population by means other than wars or epidemics, mere campaigning for birth control and distributing contraceptives has proven fairly inefficient," end quote. The bureaucracy's interests are superlative to ours. While many campaigns, such as those for birth control, have inevitably proven fruitless in a procreative society, the same follows for atmospheric protection in a densely industrialized society. Agenda 21's conservation and management of resources for development addresses precisely this. The document also embraces sensible codifications like the policing of deforestation, conserving biodiversity, and implementing stable policies for business and industry to operate efficiently and responsibly. As always, however, a caveat tirelessly resonates like the dinner bell to an impoverished African village: negativity consuming positivity. Reducing perilous emissions, such as carbon, that are emitted from various industries for the sake of going green isn't going to happen overnight, and not to mention on a ramen noodle every night budget. Due to these costly enhancements and extensive state regulations invariably propping up prices, the free market will topple over one advantageous exchange at a time. Further, corporate partnerships will transition into a globalized gamble of Russian roulette. The overshadowing theme of Agenda 21's conclusory E, education, mandates the universalization of primary education for everyone on Earth. Vis-a-vis state-run propaganda conjured and choreographed by the UN, the mindless lemmings will consent to indoctrinated precepts that nature is superlative of man and collectivism is superlative of individuality. But it doesn't stop there. The cancerous tumor grows. As is already visible, trivial curricula is absorbed, regurgitated, and discarded versus teaching students advantageous survival skills. In a civilization so dependent on industry, what'll happen when the complex collapses as a result of detailed, preventive, and, quite frankly, anti-productive, eco-friendly strategies? On the contrary, one organization that believes Agenda 21 is in fact productive is ICLEI, imposing the document's ideologies upon global municipalities. On a global purview, the UN plans to initially implement sub-programs of Agenda 21 within G8 countries such as US, or the US, European Union, and Canada. Domestically, programs will be executed by federal, state, regional, and local political proponents such as Nancy Pelosi, John Kerry, and Harry Reid. While 178 governments voted to implement the program, all hope is not yet lost. It's not too late to turn back the tide. Australia is a paragon of resistance towards Agenda 21, coining it as, quote, a threat to freedom, end quote. Across the Pacific Ocean, opposition has also developed in recent years. The Republican Party's adoption of an anti-Agenda 21 resolution limits the eminent legislation's participation and funding in the U.S. Quote, we strongly reject the UN's Agenda 21 as erosive to American sovereignty, end quote. In order to ensure that the UN's fascist Agenda 21 is never actualized, we, the inhabitants of Earth, must take a stand and fight back. Share this video with your friends and family, inform everyone you know about what's happening, and find out what subtle implications have already been introduced in your local district. Let your representatives and council members hear your voice. In Liberty and Vigilance, on behalf of Infowars.com and Press for Truth, correspondent Andrew Demeter, signing off.